"Please, don't hurt me," screams the black woman, her leg caught in steel jaws as the bearded mountain man emerges from the pines, his weathered hands reaching toward her trembling form. The frontier town had already written her story, another unwanted soul destined for cruelty or worse in the unforgiving wilderness. They expected her to disappear into suffering, forgotten like so many before her. But this gruff hermit, haunted by ghosts of war and living among wounded creatures, sees something the others missed. She carries secrets that could heal his broken spirit, while he offers the protection her brilliant mind desperately needs. Yet their unlikely bond threatens to expose truths that could destroy them both, her forbidden knowledge and his criminal past. Will their partnership forge salvation, or will the forces hunting them crush any hope of survival? The stagecoach wheels kicked up clouds of dust as Mee Carter clutched her worn leather satchel against her chest. Montana territory stretched endlessly before her, harsh and unforgiving under the blazing afternoon sun. She had traveled 3 weeks to reach this moment, 3 weeks to escape the suffocating poverty of Chicago and start fresh as a mail-order bride. The driver spat tobacco juice over the side, his weathered face turned back toward her with a warning look. "Stay clear of the mountain trails," he had said. "That hermit bridger sets traps up there for wild animals. Dangerous country for a woman alone." Mee nodded silently. She had no intention of wandering into the wilderness. Her future husband, Edgar Whitmore, would be waiting at the general store in Copper Ridge, a respectable bank manager who promised security and protection. She touched the hidden medical journals sewn into her satchel's lining. Her grandmother's healing knowledge would remain her secret. No one could know about her training, not in a world that barely tolerated her existence, let alone her intelligence. The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Henderson's general store. Mee stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her dark dress dusty from the journey. Several townspeople stopped their conversations to stare. Their eyes held the familiar mixture of suspicion and hostility she had known her entire life. Edgar Whitmore was nowhere to be seen. Mee waited an hour outside the store, then 2 hours. The afternoon sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky orange and red. Mrs. Henderson emerged from behind the counter, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You can't wait here all night." Mee straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Whitmore arranged to meet me today. Perhaps there's been a delay." "Perhaps." Mrs. Henderson's tone suggested otherwise. "His house is up the mountain road past Miller's Creek. You'll need to find your own way." The woman disappeared back into the store, leaving me alone on the empty boardwalk. Night would fall soon. The mountain road stretched before her, winding through dense forest toward an uncertain welcome. Mee had no choice. She shouldered her satchel and began walking. The forest closed around her like a living thing. Pine trees towered overhead, their branches blocking out most of the remaining daylight. Mee's footsteps echoed softly on the packed earth trail. Every shadow seemed to hold potential danger. Every snapping twig made her heart race faster. The path forked ahead. One route continued up the mountain, steep and treacherous in the growing darkness. The other cut through a meadow, appearing shorter and safer. Mee chose the meadow path. 20 minutes later, she realized her mistake. The trail had vanished completely. Dense undergrowth surrounded her on all sides. Mee pushed forward, hoping to find another path or clearing. Branches caught at her dress. Thorns scratched her hands and arms. Then she heard it. A sharp metallic snap echoed through the trees. Pain shot up Mee's left leg like fire. She looked down to see steel jaws clamped around her ankle, their teeth pressing against her boot leather. A bear trap. The driver's warning echoed in her mind. That hermit bridger sets traps up there. Mee pulled against the metal contraption. The jaws held firm. She tried to pry them open with her hands. The steel wouldn't budge. Panic rose in her throat as darkness gathered around her. No one knew where she was. No one would come looking until morning, if at all. Heavy footsteps approached through the underbrush. Mee's blood turned to ice. A large figure emerged from the shadows between the pine trees. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and clothes that had seen too many seasons in the wilderness. His eyes caught what little light remained, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "Please don't hurt me," Me whispered. The mountain man stopped several feet away. His weathered hands hung loose at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you. Hold still." He knelt beside the trap, his movements careful and deliberate. Me watched his face as he worked. Deep lines marked his features, carved by weather and something heavier. Pain, maybe, or regret. His fingers found the trap's release mechanism with practiced ease. The steel jaws opened. Me pulled her leg free, gasping with relief. The boot leather had protected her from serious injury, but her ankle throbbed where the metal had pressed against it. The man stood and stepped back, giving her space. "You're bleeding." Me looked down. Small cuts marked her hands from fighting through the underbrush. Nothing serious, but they stung in the cool mountain air. "I have something that will help." The man gestured toward the trees. "My cabin's not far." Me's mind raced. Following a strange mountain hermit into the wilderness violated every rule of safety she had ever learned. But night was falling fast, and she was lost with nowhere else to go. The cuts on her hands needed attention, and her ankle might not support a long walk back to town. She nodded once. The mountain man turned and began walking deeper into the forest. Me followed, each step taking her further from the life she had planned and toward something completely unknown. If you are enjoying this story of how an unexpected encounter in a trap will change two isolated souls forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts, because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in the Montana wilderness will completely change everything Me thought she knew about survival, partnership, and finding her true calling. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a fairy tale. Small but sturdy, built from hand-hewn logs with smoke drifting from a stone chimney. Warm light glowed through two windows, welcoming after the cold darkness of the forest. The mountain man pushed open the wooden door. Me hesitated on the threshold. Everything she had been taught warned her against entering a stranger's home, especially a man's home. Especially alone in the wilderness with no one to hear her scream. But her ankle throbbed with each heartbeat. The cuts on her hands had begun to sting worse in the mountain air. She stepped inside. The cabin's interior surprised her. Clean and organized, with handmade furniture arranged around a stone fireplace. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books and glass jars containing dried herbs. The air smelled of wood smoke and something medicinal she couldn't identify. Then Me saw them. Wooden crates and makeshift pens scattered throughout the cabin, each containing injured animals in various stages of recovery. A young fox with a splinted leg, an owl missing several wing feathers, a raccoon with bandages wrapped around its tiny paws. The mountain man noticed her staring. "They'll be released once they're strong enough." Me knelt beside the fox's crate. The animal watched her with bright, intelligent eyes. Its splint had been applied with careful precision, the wooden supports perfectly aligned to encourage proper healing. This man understood anatomy and medicine. "Sit by the fire." The mountain man gestured toward a rough-hewn chair. "I'll tend those cuts." Me settled into the chair, grateful for the warmth. The man moved around his cabin with quiet efficiency, gathering supplies from various shelves, clean cloth, a ceramic bowl, several glass jars filled with different herbs. He worked like someone accustomed to treating injuries. He knelt beside her chair and began cleaning the scratches on her hands. His touch was gentle, professional. Me studied his face in the firelight. The deep lines she had noticed earlier spoke of suffering beyond simple wilderness living. This was a man carrying heavy burdens. "What's your name?" Me asked softly. "Silas Bridger." He continued working on her hands. "You?" "Me Carter. I came here to marry Edgar Whitmore." Silas's hands paused for just a moment before resuming their careful ministrations. He said nothing about Edgar, but something in his expression shifted, a tightening around his eyes. "You know him?" "I know of him," Silas applied an herbal paste to one of the deeper cuts. The mixture smelled of sage and something sharper. Bank manager, important man in town. The way he said important carried weight, not admiration. Something closer to warning. Me watched Silas work. His movements were precise, methodical, like someone who had done this many times before. The thought struck her suddenly. This man had military training. She could see it in the way he carried himself, the efficiency of his motions. A soldier's discipline softened by years of solitude. You were in the war. It wasn't a question. Silas's hands stilled completely. When he looked up, his eyes held depths of pain she recognized. Her father had worn that same expression after returning from battle, the look of a man who had seen too much death. Union medic. His voice was barely above a whisper. Lost my whole unit outside Atlanta. Should have been able to save them. Me's heart clenched. She understood now why he lived alone with injured animals, trying to save lives he couldn't save before, seeking redemption through small acts of healing. Silas finished bandaging her hands and moved to examine her ankle. He unlaced her boot with careful fingers, checking for serious damage. The skin was bruised but unbroken. He wrapped it with practiced skill. You'll be fine in a few days. He sat back on his heels. I can take you back to town in the morning. Me nodded, though something inside her resisted the idea of returning. The cabin felt safer than anywhere she had been in months, maybe years. No hostile stares, no whispered judgments, just quiet acceptance and gentle care. Heavy footsteps approached outside. Silas tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward a rifle hanging over the fireplace. The cabin door burst open without warning. Edgar Whitmore stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger and exertion. He was smaller than me had expected, with thinning hair and soft features that spoke of comfortable living. His eyes swept the cabin before settling on me with possessive intensity. There you are. Edgar stepped inside without invitation. I've been looking everywhere. Mrs. Henderson said you headed up the mountain road. Me started to explain about getting lost, about the trap, but Edgar wasn't listening. His attention had shifted to Silas, who stood slowly near the fireplace. The two men studied each other with obvious mutual dislike. Bridger. Edgar's voice carried authority he clearly expected to be obeyed. I'll take my bride home now, my bride. The words hit me like a physical blow, not his intended wife or his guest, his property, something he owned and could collect at will. Silas said nothing, but his posture had changed. No longer the gentle healer who had tended her wounds. Now he looked like the soldier he had once been, ready for conflict. Edgar moved toward me, reaching for her arm. Come along. We have a wedding to plan. Me pulled back instinctively. Edgar's fingers closed around her wrist anyway, tighter than necessary. His grip carried an unmistakable message about who held power in their relationship. She's injured, Silas said quietly. The ankle needs rest. She looks fine to me. Edgar's tone brooked no argument. Me, gather your things. Me looked between the two men. Edgar represented everything she had come west to find. Security, respectability, a chance at a normal life. But his grip on her wrist felt like a shackle. His eyes held no warmth, no partnership, only ownership. Silas offered something different. She couldn't name it yet, but she felt it in the gentle way he had treated her injuries, the careful respect in his voice, the understanding that passed between them without words. Edgar tugged at her arm. We're leaving. Now, Me made her choice. She pulled free of Edgar's grip and stayed seated by the fire. I'm not ready to leave yet. If you are enjoying this story of how a mountain encounter is revealing the true nature of these three souls, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen next in Silas's cabin will force me to make a choice that will change all their lives forever. Edgar's face darkened at Me's defiance. His soft features hardened into something ugly and controlling. He stepped closer to her chair, looming over her with deliberate intimidation. You don't have a choice in this matter. We have an arrangement. Me met his stare without flinching. An arrangement you failed to honor, I waited for hours at the general store. Business delayed me. Important business. Edgar's voice carried the arrogance of a man unused to being questioned. Now collect your belongings, we're leaving immediately. Silas moved slightly, positioning himself between Edgar and me. The shift was subtle but unmistakable, a barrier of protection that spoke louder than words. Edgar noticed. His eyes narrowed as he studied the mountain man with fresh suspicion. How convenient that she ended up here, in your trap, in your cabin. Accidents happen in the wilderness. Silas's voice remained level, but steel had crept into his tone, especially to people who don't know the territory. Indeed they do. Edgar smiled, but the expression held no warmth. Accidents can be very dangerous for those who interfere with other men's property. Property. There was that word again. Me felt something inside her recoil at being discussed like livestock. She had escaped Chicago's poverty only to find herself claimed by a different kind of cage. I'm not anyone's property. Both men turned toward her. Edgar's expression showed genuine surprise, as if furniture had suddenly begun speaking. Silas nodded slightly, approval flickering in his eyes. Edgar recovered quickly. Of course not, poor choice of words. His tone became falsely gentle, the voice of someone humoring a child. But we do have obligations to each other, legal obligations. Me knew he was right. The marriage contract existed. Her train ticket had been paid. She owed Edgar money she couldn't repay. But debt and ownership were different things, even if the law didn't always recognize the distinction. I'll honor our agreement, me said carefully. After my ankle heals properly. Edgar's mask of politeness slipped again. Your ankle looks fine to me. Then you're not looking hard enough. The words came out sharper than me intended. Edgar's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. Men like him didn't tolerate correction, especially from women who looked like her. I've had enough of this nonsense. Edgar stepped toward her again. You're coming with me now, willing or not. Silas moved faster than me expected. One moment he stood near the fireplace, the next he blocked Edgar's path completely. The two men faced each other across 3 feet of tent space. The lady said she wants to stay. The lady needs to learn her place. Maybe you need to learn yours. Edgar's hand dropped toward his coat pocket. Me tensed, wondering if he carried a weapon. But Edgar wasn't a physical man. He was soft from comfortable living, used to getting his way through money and social pressure rather than force. After a long moment, Edgar stepped back. His eyes promised future consequences for this humiliation. Fine. Stay in this hovel with your savage protector. The words dripped with venom. But remember me, I own your debt, I own your future. When you're ready to be reasonable, come find me. Edgar turned and strode toward the door. He paused on the threshold, looking back with cold calculation. Bridger, you might want to consider the consequences of harboring another man's intended wife. The town takes a dim view of such behavior. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then Edgar was gone, his footsteps fading into the forest night. Silas remained motionless until the sounds disappeared completely. Only then did he relax his soldier's posture. He moved to the window, watching through the glass until he was satisfied Edgar had truly left. Me stayed in her chair by the fire, processing what had just happened. She had defied Edgar Whitmore, chosen her own path over security and social expectations. The magnitude of that decision began to sink in. You can still go after him. Silas's voice was quiet, without judgment. Catch up before he reaches town. Me studied the mountain man's profile in the firelight. Strong jaw shadowed with beard. Eyes that had seen too much death but still held gentleness. Hands that could set traps and heal wounds with equal skill. Is that what you think I should do? Silas turned from the window. I think you should do whatever feels right to you, not what other people expect, not what's safe or proper. What feels right? Me had never been asked that question before. Her entire life had been shaped by other people's expectations and society's demands. What felt right to her was a foreign concept. She looked around the cabin again, the injured animals recovering in their makeshift beds. The medical supplies organized with military precision. The books on the shelves that suggested intelligence and learning. This place felt more like home than anywhere she had ever been. "I'd like to stay, at least until morning," Silas nodded. "You can have the bed, I'll sleep by the fire." "That's not necessary. I don't want to put you out of your own bed." "It's no trouble." Silas began arranging blankets near the fireplace. "I don't sleep well most nights anyway. Bad dreams." Me understood about bad dreams. She had plenty of her own, memories of hunger and cold and helplessness, the weight of secrets she couldn't share, the constant fear of being discovered and destroyed. As Silas prepared his makeshift bed, me noticed something else. He favored his left side, moving carefully as if compensating for some hidden injury. When he thought she wasn't watching, he pressed his hand against his ribs with a barely suppressed grimace. "You're hurt." Silas paused in arranging his blankets. "Old wound, acts up in cold weather." "How old?" "Few weeks. Maybe a month." He tried to sound casual, but me caught the strain in his voice. "Bear got too close to one of my traps, had to discourage it from coming back." Me stood up, testing her ankle. The joint was stiff but stable. She moved toward Silas with growing concern. "Let me see." "It's nothing serious." "I'll be the judge of that." Something in her tone made Silas look up sharply. Me met his gaze with steady confidence. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed in medical matters. If you are enjoying this story of how Me is about to reveal her hidden talents that will change everything between her and Silas, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what Me does next will transform her from a helpless bride into something far more powerful and surprising. 3 weeks had passed since Edgar's angry departure from the cabin. Me had settled into a routine that felt more natural than anything she had ever known. She helped Silas tend the injured animals, learning his methods while secretly applying her grandmother's healing knowledge. They worked well together, two damaged souls finding purpose in mending broken things. The townspeople who sought Me's help came after dark. Whispered recommendations passed between desperate mothers and worried wives. A child with fever, a man with infected wounds, a woman struggling through difficult pregnancy. Me treated them all, accepting payment in eggs and vegetables rather than coin. Silas never questioned her knowledge or asked where she had learned such skills. He simply accepted her expertise the same way he accepted the sunrise, natural and right. But Me noticed changes in him. The nightmares came more frequently now. He would wake gasping and drenched in sweat, calling out names of men who would never answer. During the day, he moved more slowly, favoring his injured side with increasing difficulty. The infection in his old wound was spreading. Me tried to treat it with external remedies, poultices of sage and honey. Clean bandages changed twice daily, but the fever had taken hold now, burning through his body like wildfire. Silas needed stronger medicine than she could provide without revealing the full extent of her training. On a cold Tuesday morning, Silas collapsed while feeding the animals. Me found him unconscious near the fox's pen, his skin burning with fever. She dragged him to his bed with strength born of desperation. His breathing was shallow and rapid. The wound in his side had opened again, weeping infection despite all her careful tending. Time was running out. Me made her choice. She opened her leather satchel and removed the hidden compartment sewn into its lining. Her grandmother's medical journals emerged into the lamplight, pages filled with handwritten formulas and techniques passed down through generations of healers. Knowledge that could save lives or destroy her if discovered. She worked through the day and into the night. Ground willow bark for fever, mixed precise amounts of golden seal and echinacea for infection, applied hot compresses to draw out the poison, forced liquid between Silas's cracked lips drop by careful drop. By dawn, the fever had broken. Silas woke weak but clear-headed. He found me asleep in the chair beside his bed, her grandmother's journal open in her lap. Medical supplies covered every surface of the cabin, the evidence of her true abilities impossible to hide. Me stirred as he sat up. Her eyes flew open, immediately alert and checking his condition with professional assessment. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by horses." Silas's voice was hoarse but strong, but alive. He looked around the cabin, taking in the organized chaos of medical treatment. His gaze settled on the journal in Me's lap. The careful drawings of human anatomy, the detailed notes on herbal remedies. "You're a doctor." Me tensed, waiting for rejection or disgust. Instead, she saw only wonder in Silas's eyes, and gratitude deeper than words. "My grandmother taught me. Before she died, she made me promise to use the knowledge to help people." Me's voice was barely above a whisper. "No one can know. They'd run me out of every town from here to California." Silas understood. He had seen enough prejudice to know what Me risked by practicing medicine. A black woman claiming medical authority challenged everything society believed about natural order and proper roles. "Your secret is safe with me." Me felt tears she didn't know she had been holding back. Someone finally knew who she really was. Someone accepted her completely without judgment or fear. Over the following days, their partnership deepened into something neither had expected to find. Me taught Silas advanced techniques for treating animal injuries. He shared his knowledge of wilderness survival and natural resources. They worked as equals, each respecting the other's expertise. The stream of nighttime patients increased. Word spread carefully through the community that the woman staying with the mountain hermit possessed unusual healing abilities. Me's reputation grew in whispers and shadows, but Edgar Whitmore was also building something. Resentment and anger had festered in the weeks since his humiliation at Silas's cabin. He spread rumors about me being corrupted by wilderness living, about Silas stealing another man's rightful bride. The stories found fertile ground in minds already predisposed to suspicion. Me sensed the growing tension when she ventured into town for supplies. Hostile stares followed her movements. Conversations stopped when she approached. The general store owner accepted her money with obvious reluctance. "People are talking," she told Silas that evening. "Edgar's been busy spreading stories." Silas continued sharpening his hunting knife, but his movements had grown tense. "What kind of stories?" "The kind that end badly for people like us." They both knew what she meant. A black woman living unmarried with a white mountain man violated every social convention. Add Me's secret medical practice and Silas's reputation as an outsider, and they had created a situation that threatened the community's sense of proper order. 3 nights later, Sheriff Murphy arrived at the cabin. He came alone, which Me took as a hopeful sign. The sheriff was a practical man, more interested in keeping peace than enforcing every social nicety, but his expression was grim as he dismounted from his horse. "Evening, Bridger." "Miss Carter." The sheriff touched his hat brim in reluctant politeness. "We need to talk." Silas stepped onto the porch, Me close behind. The animals in their pens grew restless, sensing tension in the air. "Edgar Whitmore's been filing complaints." Sheriff Murphy's voice was tired, like a man forced to handle distasteful duties. "Says you stole his intended bride, corrupted her with wilderness living and unseemly behavior." Me felt anger rise in her chest. "I chose to stay. No one stole anything." "I'm sure that's true, miss, but the law sees things differently. You have a contract with Mr. Whitmore, legal obligations." Silas stepped forward slightly. "What exactly are you saying, Sheriff?" "I'm saying this situation needs resolution before it gets out of hand. Too many people talking, too many rumors flying around." The sheriff looked uncomfortable but determined. "Miss Carter needs to either honor her agreement with Mr. Whitmore or leave the territory entirely." The ultimatum hung in the mountain air like smoke from a dying fire. If you are enjoying this story of how Me and Silas's growing partnership is facing its greatest threat yet, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what Edgar Whitmore does next will force a confrontation that will test everything they've built together. Sheriff Murphy shifted uncomfortably on the cabin porch. His weathered hands fidgeted with his hat brim as he delivered news that would change everything. "There's more. Edgar's filed additional charges against you, Bridger. Says you stole money from the bank to pay for Miss Carter's services." The sheriff's voice carried doubt about the accusation. "Claims he has evidence." Me felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Silas went rigid beside her, his soldier's instincts recognizing a carefully laid trap. "What kind of evidence?" Silas kept his voice steady, but me caught the edge of steel beneath. "Says he found banknotes hidden in your storage shed. Serial numbers match money that went missing last month." Sheriff Murphy looked genuinely troubled by the accusation. Edgar's demanding immediate arrest and trial. Me's mind raced. Edgar had been planning this for weeks, building his case while they lived peacefully in the mountains. The missing money, the planted evidence, the convenient timing, all designed to destroy Silas and reclaim his property in one decisive stroke. "When did this money supposedly go missing?" Me asked. "3 weeks ago, right around the time you chose to stay here instead of honoring your marriage contract." The sheriff's tone suggested he saw the convenient connection. "Edgar says that's when Bridger made his payment for your affections." The insult hit me like a physical blow. Edgar had reduced her to a commodity bought and sold between men. Worse, he had crafted a story that would resonate with every prejudice the community already held. "I want to see this evidence," Silas said. "It's been moved to the bank for safekeeping. Edgar's calling for a town meeting tomorrow to present his case." Sheriff Murphy replaced his hat with obvious reluctance. "I'm sorry, Bridger. I have to ask you to come into town for questioning." Me watched Silas weigh his options. Running would confirm his guilt in everyone's minds. Staying meant facing a rigged trial with predetermined outcome. Either choice led to destruction. "I'll come voluntarily, but Miss Carter stays here." "Afraid that's not possible. She's a key witness. Needs to be available for testimony." Me understood the real message. Edgar wanted her where he could control her, isolated from Silas and dependent on Edgar's mercy for protection from an angry mob. "I'll testify to the truth," Me said firmly. "Silas Bridger never stole anything. This is Edgar's revenge for being rejected." Sheriff Murphy nodded sympathetically. "I believe you, miss. But a lot of folks in town are worked up about this situation. They see a respectable banker's word against a mountain hermit and a runaway bride. Right or wrong, that's how they'll judge it." The sheriff mounted his horse and rode into the gathering dusk. Me and Silas stood on the porch long after the hoofbeats faded, both understanding how thoroughly they had been outmaneuvered. That night, Me sat by lamplight reading her grandmother's journals. Not for medical knowledge this time, but for strength. The old woman had faced impossible situations with dignity and intelligence. She had survived slavery and Reconstruction through careful planning and strategic thinking. Me needed those same qualities now. She studied everything she knew about Edgar Whitmore, his position at the bank, his desperate need to maintain respectability, his fury at being publicly rejected. Men like Edgar didn't risk exposure unless they faced greater dangers. Something else was driving his actions, something that made destroying Silas worth the risk of public scrutiny. Me thought about the timing. The missing money Edgar claimed had been stolen 3 weeks ago, right when she had chosen to stay with Silas, but also right when Edgar should have been preparing for their wedding, arranging financial matters, establishing his household. What if Edgar couldn't afford to marry her? What if he needed the missing bank money for their wedding expenses and living arrangements? Me's blood went cold as the pieces fell into place. Edgar hadn't stolen money to frame Silas. He had stolen it for himself, then created the frame-up to cover his own crime. If Me married him as planned, any scrutiny of his finances would be deflected by domestic respectability. But her rejection had exposed him to investigation. Now Edgar faced a desperate choice: confess his embezzlement and face prison, or destroy the witnesses to his crime and maintain his respectable facade. Me shook Silas awake before dawn. "We need to get to town early before the meeting starts." Silas sat up, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" "Edgar's the real thief. He stole the money himself and planted evidence to frame you. Me spoke rapidly, her thoughts crystallizing as she voiced them. But he made a mistake. Bank records will show when the money actually disappeared. If we can prove the timeline doesn't match his story. The bank records are under Edgar's control. He can alter them however he wants. Me smiled grimly. Not all of them. The Territorial Banking Commission requires duplicate records to be filed monthly. Those copies are kept in the territorial capital, completely outside Edgar's reach. Silas stood and began dressing with military efficiency. How do you know about banking regulations? My father worked for a bank in Chicago before the war, taught me to read financial documents and spot irregularities. Me gathered her grandmother's journals and medical supplies. If Edgar's been embezzling, there will be traces in the official records. Even if you're right, how do we prove it? The territorial records are 2 days' ride from here. Me's smile grew confident. We don't need to prove it today. We just need to plant enough doubt to delay the trial. Force them to investigate properly instead of rushing to judgment. They rode into Copper Ridge as the sun climbed over the mountains. The town buzzed with anticipation for the evening's confrontation. Groups of men gathered outside the saloon, discussing the charges against Silas. Women clustered near the general store, whispering about Me's improper behavior. Me felt the weight of hostile stares but kept her chin high. She had faced prejudice her entire life. Today she would transform it into a weapon for justice. Edgar waited for them outside the bank, flanked by 3 other men Me didn't recognize. His smile was triumphant, certain of victory. He had prepared for this moment carefully, arranging every detail to ensure his enemy's destruction. But Edgar had underestimated Me Carter. He saw a runaway bride who could be intimidated into compliance. He didn't see the intelligent woman who had saved Silas's life through medical expertise, who had built a secret practice through strategic thinking, who carried her grandmother's legacy of surviving impossible odds. Me dismounted from her horse and walked directly toward Edgar with steady purpose. The final confrontation was about to begin. If you are enjoying this story of how Me has uncovered Edgar's deadly deception and is preparing to fight back with intelligence and courage, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what happens next in Copper Ridge will determine whether justice or corruption wins the day. The makeshift courthouse in Henderson's General Store overflowed with spectators. Every chair was filled, men standing along the walls, women crowding near the windows. The entire town had come to witness Edgar Whitmore's moment of triumph over the mountain hermit and his defiant bride. Edgar sat at the front table, confident and composed. His evidence was arranged in neat stacks before him. Banknotes with matching serial numbers. A sworn statement about the timing of the theft. 3 witnesses ready to testify about Silas's suspicious behavior. Silas entered with Me at his side. Hostile murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone spat on the floor near Silas's feet. Me felt the weight of dozens of stares, each one carrying judgment and condemnation. Sheriff Murphy called for order. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if charges should be filed. Mr. Whitmore, present your evidence. Edgar rose with theatrical precision. He held up the bank notes, their serial numbers clearly visible to the crowd. These were found hidden in Silas Bridger's storage shed yesterday morning. They match exactly the money stolen from my bank 3 weeks ago. Murmurs of anger swept through the assembled townspeople. The evidence appeared damning and absolute. Furthermore, Edgar continued, the timing coincides perfectly with Miss Carter's decision to abandon our marriage contract. Bridger clearly paid her to stay with him instead of honoring her legal obligations to me. Me stood before Edgar could continue. Every eye in the room fixed on her with hostile attention. She had one chance to plant doubt in their minds. One opportunity to turn Edgar's certainty against him. Mr. Whitmore, when exactly did you discover this missing money? Edgar smiled condescendingly. 3 weeks ago, when I was preparing our wedding arrangements. The money was needed for household expenses. And when did you report the theft to Sheriff Murphy? Edgar's smile faltered slightly. Yesterday, when the evidence against Bridger came to light. Me turned to address the crowd. So Edgar waited 3 weeks to report a theft from his own bank. 3 weeks while a criminal supposedly roamed free with stolen money. I was conducting my own investigation, Edgar said quickly. Gathering evidence before making accusations. Or covering up your own crimes while creating a scapegoat. The accusation hit the room like a thunderclap. Edgar's face went white with shock and rage. Sheriff Murphy leaned forward with sharp interest. That's a serious charge, Miss Carter. Do you have evidence? Me walked to Edgar's table and picked up the bank notes. She studied them in the lamplight, running her fingers along the edges with practiced examination. These bills are crisp, newly printed. She held one up for the crowd to see. But they've been artificially aged. See the slight discoloration around the edges. Someone rubbed them with dirt and coffee grounds to make them appear older. Edgar lunged for the notes. She's lying, desperate to save her lover. Me stepped back, keeping the evidence out of Edgar's reach. If these were stolen 3 weeks ago and hidden in a mountain storage shed, they would show real weather damage, rain stains, genuine dirt, natural aging from temperature changes. Sheriff Murphy examined the bills himself. His expression grew thoughtful as he noticed the artificial aging Me had described. There's more, Me continued. Edgar claims the money was stolen for wedding expenses, but our marriage was arranged through correspondence months ago. Any legitimate preparation costs would have been budgeted in advance. The crowd began murmuring with uncertainty. Edgar's perfect case was developing cracks under Me's methodical assault. She's a runaway bride and a liar. Edgar's voice rose to near hysteria. Why would you believe her word over mine? Me faced the crowd with quiet dignity. Because I can prove Edgar's timeline is impossible. Mrs. Henderson, you ordered supplies for my wedding 3 weeks ago. Do you remember Edgar paying for them? Mrs. Henderson shifted uncomfortably near the window. He said payment would come later, after the ceremony. Mrs. Walsh, Edgar promised to pay your dressmaking fee after the wedding. Correct? The dressmaker nodded reluctantly. Said he was waiting for some investments to mature. Me turned back to Edgar. You had no money 3 weeks ago. No available funds for wedding expenses, because you had already stolen it from the bank and needed time to cover your tracks. Edgar's facade crumbled completely. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool mountain air. His hands trembled as he reached for the fabricated evidence. The real theft happened months ago, Me pressed on. Small amounts taken gradually to cover gambling debts or failed investments. When the territorial banking inspection was announced, you panicked. You needed a scapegoat and a reason for any missing funds. Sheriff Murphy stood slowly. His hand rested on his sidearm as he studied Edgar with new understanding. That's why you were so desperate to marry me, Me continued. A wife would provide respectability and distraction from financial irregularities. But when I chose Sela's instead, you had to create this elaborate frame-up. Edgar broke completely. She's making wild accusations. I'm a respected member of this community. Then open your private bank records for inspection. Show everyone how you afforded a mail-order bride and wedding expenses on a bank manager's salary. The color drained from Edgar's face. Around the room, townspeople began to see their respected banker in a new light. His desperate behavior, his immediate accusations, his 3-week delay in reporting the supposed theft. Mrs. Murphy pushed through the crowd. The sheriff's wife rarely spoke in public gatherings, but now she faced me with tears in her eyes. You saved my daughter's life when the fever took her, used medicines the town doctor didn't have. Her voice carried clearly through the silent room. This woman is a healer, not a criminal. Other voices joined hers. The miller whose infected wound Me had treated. The rancher's wife whose difficult birth Me had attended. One by one, Me's secret patients revealed themselves, testifying to her character and medical skill. Edgar realized his support was evaporating. In desperation, he reached for the planted evidence, attempting to destroy it before further examination could expose his deception. Sheriff Murphy's hand clamped down on Edgar's wrist. "I think we need to take a much closer look at those bank records. All of them." 6 months later, Mee Carter operated the territory's first integrated medical practice from her clinic in Copper Ridge. Silas worked beside her as her trusted partner and assistant, their shared trauma transformed into healing purpose. Edgar Whitmore served a prison sentence for embezzlement and attempted fraud, his respectability permanently destroyed. Mee had found something she never expected in the Montana wilderness. Not just love or partnership, but the freedom to use her abilities openly and proudly. She treated patients of every background, training other women in healing arts regardless of their race or social standing. Silas had discovered that his war trauma could be channeled into saving lives rather than mourning the dead. Together, they built something neither could have achieved alone. A true partnership of equals that proved dignity and intelligence could triumph over the deepest prejudices. The mountain trap that had brought them together became a symbol of unexpected blessings. Sometimes the most frightening moments led to the greatest transformations. Sometimes getting caught was really getting free. If you enjoyed this story of how Mee and Silas found justice and partnership against impossible odds, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how stories of courage and dignity can connect us across any distance. Because Mee's journey from trapped bride to respected healer proves that our greatest strengths often emerge when we're brave enough to be our true selves.